With NBA free agency going on, we are seeing deals being made throughout the league, some good deals and some bad deals. And for today's video, we are going to look back at every team's worst free agency signing since 2010. And man, there were some bad signings that happened over the course of this period. But honestly, some teams have spent their money pretty wisely in free agency, and I really had to nitpick some of their worst signings, but I had to come up with something. So if you guys do enjoy this style of video, please drop a thumbs up and let me know if you guys want to see the opposite of this, every team's best contract signing in free agency since 2010. Just let me know, and let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the Atlanta Hawks, and they signed Dwight Howard back in the 2016 offseason to a 3-year, $70 million contract to lure him away from the Houston Rockets. Yeah, this really didn't work out for Atlanta, as Dwight Howard only played for Atlanta in 1 year in the 2017 season. He put up 13 points and shot 63% from the field across 74 games, but then they traded him in the offseason in a complete salary dump to the Charlotte Hornets for Marco Bellinelli, Miles Plumlee, and a 2017 second rounder, which ended up being Tyler Dorsey. Dwight Howard definitely bounced around the league after that time period. And yeah, Atlanta giving him $70 million guaranteed to only play 1 year, then to have to salary dump the offseason later. Not a good signing. There's going to be a lot of free agency contracts that went down in 2015 and 2016 referenced in this video. And the first one, we have the Washington Wizards signing Ian Mahinmi from the Indiana Pacers in the 2016 offseason for a 4-year, $64 million contract. Mahinmi hit free agency at the right time, because this man was probably never going to make over $10 million ever in his career. But in 2016 for the Pacers, he played in 71 games. He finished 15th in most improved player voting with 9 points and 7 rebounds a night, shot 58% from the field. And then the Washington Wizards desperately needed a big man, so they tried to invest into the 29-year-old center from the Indiana Pacers. And over the course of Mahinmi's time in Washington, he averaged 5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and shot 52% from the field, and played above 40 games in a year just once. Not a good contract by Washington here. I was going back and forth between two guys. I almost went with Evan Fournier for the New York Knicks back in 2021. That contract was not great for them, but I had to go with the infamous Joakim Noah signing back in 2016. It was a 4-year, $72 million contract, as Noah was also hitting free agency for pretty much one last time in his career. He was coming off a season where he averaged just 4 points and 4 rebounds for the Bulls across 29 games, but he was just 2 years removed from winning Defensive Player of the Year and finishing 4th in MVP voting. Yeah, Joakim Noah was abysmal for the Knicks. He only spent 2 years in New York. He averaged 5 points and 8 rebounds a night in his first 46 games in 2017. Then he only played 7 games in 2018, where he averaged 1 point and 2 rebounds and was making over $18 million a year. It's probably the worst free agency signing in possibly the New York Knicks' franchise history. So you could go with a couple guys here for the Charlotte Hornets. You could talk about Gordon Hayward as well, but you know what? They were able to flip them for Trey Mann and Micic at the deadline. It's at least something, right? So I'm going to go with Nick Batum, who they gave just a massive contract to in the 2016 free agency time. It was a 5-year, $120 million contract. He was going to be making $24 million a year for the Charlotte Hornets. And this contract started off fine. He averaged 15 points in year 1, 15 points in year 2 for Charlotte, but just shooting 42% from the field, 40% from 3, and was a below average 3-point shooter as well, and did not look like the Swiss Army knife he was in Portland. In year 3 in Charlotte is where it started to fall off a little bit, just 11 points, 41% from the field, 33% from 3. Was not a good number 2 that they were trying to pair him up with Kell Walker. And then in year number 4 of the contract, he played in 75 games, but only averaged 9 points. And then in the final year, they had to live out all 5 years of this contract in 2020. He averaged 3.5 points in 22 games and was making $24 million a year. For the LA Lakers, I was really torn as well. I was going to go with Timothy Mozgov, or I was going to go with the guy I am going to go with, and it's going to be Luol Deng, just because he made a little bit more than Timothy Mozgov from both of their surprising contract offers in 2016. Timothy Mozgov was 4 years, $64 million, but Luol Deng was 4 years, $72 million, and he only spent 2 years in LA out of that 4-year deal. In 2017, he averaged 7.5 points and shot 38% from the field, and then just played 1 game in 2018. I mean, we all thought it was a terrible contract when it was offered, when it was signed, when it was agreed upon, and it's still aged as one of the worst contract extensions in the Lakers' long franchise history. Miami was also a tricky one as well. You could go with Hassan Whiteside, but he was actually fine with the contract he got in 2016. Same with Tyler Johnson. Even Deion Waiters' contract in 2017 was fine. So I'm actually going going to go with James Johnson, who got a 3-year deal in the 2017 offseason to stay with the Miami Heat. 3 years, $43 million, on average around $14 million a year. Johnson was fantastic in the 2017 season, but he really didn't rekindle any of that magic he had that year as like a defensive enforcer. He averaged 11 points in the 2018 season, shooting 50% from the field, but he really dropped off in year 2 of the contract, 7.5 points on 43% shooting in the 2019 season, and then in 2020 was traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But honestly, there's going to be a lot worse signings on this video, so I think the Miami Heat made out all right since their free agency contract since 2010. This is going to be a pretty easy one for the Memphis Grizzlies. It's going to be Chandler Parsons going to Memphis in the summer of 2016, leaving the Dallas Mavericks for Memphis for a 4-year, $94 million contract. Was going to pay him roughly $23 million a year. Parsons already got one solid deal from the Dallas Mavericks and then hit free agency again at the perfect time, a common theme you'll see in this video. And this is probably one of the worst contracts we are going to talk about in this video. So in year 1 in 2017 of this deal, he averaged 6 points a night in 34 games, was constantly hurt, averaged under 20 minutes a night, shot 33% from the field, and then maybe, you know what, things could be different in year 2 of the contract in 2018. Nope, that wasn't the case. He averaged 8 points in 36 games, shot 46% from the field, and then in year 3 of the deal in 2019, he averaged 7.5 points in 25 games, and then was traded to the Atlanta Hawks in the 2019 offseason for Solomon Hill and Miles Plumlee. Yeah, probably the worst franchise signing in Memphis Grizzlies history. Sorry to bring that up, Grizzlies fans. Summer of 2016, Portland gave out 2 massive deals. One to re-sign Allen Crabbe, 4 years, $74 million, was not a good deal, but then they also tried to sign, and they did sign, Evan Turner from the Boston Celtics, 4 years, $70 million that we're going to talk about right now. Yeah, at the time, we're like, how are these guys getting this much money? Allen Crabbe making $74 million off this contract, and Evan Turner making $70 million. Turner played 3 out of the 4 possible years here in Portland. He averaged 9 points a night in year 1 in Portland in 65 games, but was mostly coming off the bench. In year number 2, he averaged 8 points and shot 31% from 3. Year 3, 7 points and shot 21% from 3, and then was traded to the Atlanta Hawks in 2019 for Kent Bazemore. Yeah, Portland did not do a good job surrounding Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum with talent back in 2016. Staying in the year 2016 for the Houston Rockets, we're going to talk about Ryan Anderson, who they signed from the New Orleans Pelicans. They gave him a 4-year deal worth $80 million, $20 million a year for the stretch 4, who made a nice career for himself in Orlando and New Orleans. Year 1 in Houston was fine. He shot 40% from 3 and averaged 13.5 points a night, but year 2, Ryan Anderson really dropped off. He played 66 games, came off the bench for 50 of them, shot 43% from the field, 38% from 3, 9.5 points and 5 rebounds, and then was traded to the Phoenix Suns with D'Anthony Melton for Marquise Chris and Brandon Knight. Just not a good deal overall, and what could have been a nice floor spacing 4 next to James Harden at this time. You can also talk about like Christian Wood or Jeremy Lin as well for the Houston Rockets. In the playoffs in 2016 for the Toronto Raptors, Bismack Biyombo showed great defensive prowess out there as a rim protecting 5, so Orlando saw that and wanted to sign him in the 2016 offseason when they already had Nikola Vucevic as their starting center, and they gave him a 4-year deal worth $72 million, $18 million a year for Bismack Biyombo. Biyombo would just go on to spend 2 out of the 4 possible years of this contract in Orlando. He averaged 6 points coming off the bench in the 2017 season and came off the bench again in 2018, averaging 5.5 points, 52% from the field. It just really wasn't worth it paying all this money for a backup center that really wasn't going to be doing much offensively and really wasn't great defensively either, showing what he did in the 2016 playoffs, and then was part of a 3-team trade in 2018 and got sent to the Charlotte Hornets. We mentioned his name a little bit earlier in the Ryan Anderson deal. We're going to talk about Brandon Knight, who re-signed with the Phoenix Suns in the 2015 free agency period. Knight signed a 5-year, $70 million contract with the Suns, around $18 million a year. I was a big Brandon Knight fan at this time, loved him at Kentucky, and thought he was really solid in his early days in the NBA with the Detroit Pistons and the Milwaukee Bucks. And he was traded to the Phoenix Suns in the 2015 season, so they felt like they needed to re-sign him. And injuries pretty much derailed Brandon Knight's Suns career. In year number 1, he played 52 games, averaging 19.5 points, but the efficiency wasn't great, 41% from the field, 34% from 3. In year number 2 in 2017 of this contract, he played in just 54 games, started just 5 of them, shot 39% from the field, and averaged 11 points a night, and did not play at all in the 2018 season when he was recovering from a knee injury, and then was traded in the 2018 offseason for, Ryan Anderson. The Raptors have actually spent their money pretty well in free agency since 2010, but their worst signing was DeAndre Carroll from the Atlanta Hawks back in the summer of 2015. They gave him a 4-year 4-year deal worth $58 million, roughly $14.5 million a year. And yeah, Carroll wasn't great in his 2 years in Toronto. He was fine on the defensive end of the floor, but he was not good offensively. He just shot 38% from the field in year number 1, and then 40% in year number 2. And you could be like, Matt, he was more of a three-point shooter. Well, he did shoot 39% from 3 in 2016, but then in 2017, he shot 34% from 3. And then in the summer of 2017, was traded by the Raptors, and they had attached a first-round pick with him, and they sent him to the Brooklyn Nets for Justin Hamilton in a complete salary dump. In 2015, for the Milwaukee Bucks, they signed Greg Monroe from the Detroit Pistons. He swapped teams in the Central Division, 3 years, $51 million to join the Milwaukee Bucks. And Monroe was a really talented offensive big man in Detroit. That kind of carried over into Milwaukee, but not to its fullest potential, and his defense was not great whatsoever. He played in 79 games in year 1 of the contract in 2016. He shot 52% from the field and averaged 15 points a night. It was a nice start to the Bucks deal. And then 2017, he came off the bench for the Milwaukee Bucks, played in 81 games, and was a nice scorer off the bench. But then year 3, he just played in 5 games, 15 minutes a night, shot 48% from the field, and averaged 6.5 points before getting traded to the Suns for Eric Bledsoe, when Eric Bledsoe did not want to be in Phoenix anymore. Funny enough, that first round pick was then later sent to Memphis, and that actually ended up being Desmond Bane. So it was fine of a contract in Milwaukee, but it wasn't great for Greg Monroe. You could also talk about Miles Plumlee and Matthew Dellavedova as well. In 2015, the Indiana Pacers signed Monta Ellis as he was leaving the Dallas Mavericks for Indiana. They signed him to a 4-year, $43 million contract worth around $10 million a year. And this was pretty much the start of Ellis's fall off. The defense was declining. He shot 42% from the field in 2016 for the Indiana Pacers, averaging 13.5 points. Really wasn't much of a playmaker anymore. And then it fell off in 2017, played 74 games for them, 8.5 points, and shot 44% from the field. And just 2 years into the 4-year deal, the Indiana Pacers waived him in July of 2017. For the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to talk about DeAndre Jordan, who was part of the Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant sweepstakes back in the summer of 2019. DeAndre Jordan signed a 4-year, $39 million contract with the Nets to be their starting center when they already had somebody much better and younger and fresher at the 5 spot already in Jarrett Allen. Jordan just played 2 years in Brooklyn in 2020 and in 2021, coming over from the New York Knicks. He averaged 8 points and 10 rebounds in year number 1 for Brooklyn, but was not a good defender in my opinion. And then in year number 2, the defense still dropped off, and he averaged 7.5 points and 7.5 rebounds before getting traded to the Brooklyn Nets in September of 2021, and he was immediately waived 2 days later. The Kings have had a lot of bad free agency signings as well. You could talk about George Hill, but I'm going to talk about Kosta Koufos, who they ended up signing in the summer of 2015 to convince him to leave Memphis. They gave him a 4-year deal worth $32 million, and at this point, $8 million a year was a lot of money for a backup. He did spend all 4 years in Sacramento on this deal, where he ended up averaging 6 points and 5.5 rebounds, shot 54% from the field, but I just thought was a misuse of cap space at this time, and there were so many better options on the market for a backup 5 to DeMarcus Cousins in Kosta Koufos. The 2019 76ers ended up losing Jimmy Butler in free agency, so they maxed out Tobias Harris to keep him, and there was always one guy that defended Joel Embiid well, and he was on their rivals, the Boston Celtics, for some time, and they were like, you know what, it would be great if we can pair him up next to Joel Embiid, so they went out and signed Al Horford to a 4-year deal worth $109 million, $29 million a year for Al, when he was a 33-year-old. Horford went on to just spend 1 year in Philadelphia in the 2020 season. It did not work out whatsoever for Embiid and Horford in the front court together. He averaged 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. He shot 45% from the field, 35% from 3, and 76% from the line, and the 76ers had to attach a first-round pick to salary dump him in the 2020 offseason to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that first-round pick is going to be in this upcoming 2025 draft. It is top 6 protected. I mean, they did get Danny Green out of it, but it was not a good contract signing at all. We've mentioned a lot of 2019 signings recently, with DeAndre Jordan going to the Nets, Al Horford going to the Sixers, and we're going to talk about Kell Walker going to the Boston Celtics to replace Kyrie Irving. He left Charlotte, the team that drafted him, and is arguably the best player in franchise history, on a 4-year deal worth $140 million, $35 million a year. His first year in 2020 for the Celtics, he played 56 out of the possible 72 games. He was an all-star though for them, but then in year 2, his play really diminished, especially on the defensive end of the floor. He only appeared in 43 games. He shot 42% from the field and 19 points, as the Celtics ended up with another disappointing playoff exit in round 1 to the Brooklyn Nets. So in the summer of 2021, the Celtics had to attach a first-round pick, which actually ended up being Alperen Şengün, along with Kell Walker's contract to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Moses Brown, Al Horford, and a second-round pick. Man, just acquiring these players and then flipping them off for first-round picks and salary dumps, like the OKC Thunder were playing chess, not checkers at the time. We haven't really talked a lot about the 2014 offseason, but we're going to talk about Spencer Hawes signing with the LA Clippers on a 4-year deal worth $22.5 million. It was roughly $5.5 million a year, but just 2015, Spencer Hawes in Los Angeles was just not a good player whatsoever. 39% from the field, 31% from three, and averaged 5.5 points a night. He basically cut in half all his numbers that he did in Philadelphia and Cleveland in the 2014 season, and only spent 1 year in Los Angeles before getting traded to the Charlotte Hornets in the 2015 offseason, along with Matt Barnes for Lance Stevenson. Man, I hate to do it. I really do. But for the Chicago Bulls, I got to talk about Lonzo Ball, who signed a 4-year, $80 million contract with the Bulls in the 2021 offseason. He was a restricted free agent as well, and the Bulls had to attach some draft capital to convince the Pelicans not to match the offer. And the 2021 Bulls were electric, man. They were one of the best teams in the NBA at the time, with DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic, LaVine, and Lonzo Ball running the show. This was the best version we got of Lonzo Ball in the NBA. He averaged 13 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 5 assists for Chicago in the first 35 games of the season, but we know that his season was cut short in 2022. He did not play at all in 2023 or 2024. He's going to try to make a comeback in 2025, which is going to be the last year of this contract. So $80 million, $20 million a year for someone that has only appeared in 35 games is hard to justify as not a terrible contract. But hey, Pelicans, you were maybe smart for not matching this offer, but you did something equally as dumb in the 2021 offseason. We got to talk about you signing Devonte Graham from the Charlotte Hornets, 4 years, $47 million, where he only ended up playing 2 out of the 4 years of this contract in New Orleans, and he shot 36% from the field in the 2022 season and 34% from three. In 2023, he only appeared in 53 games before getting sent to San Antonio at the trade deadline, where he shot 36% from the field and 34% from three. It was not a good tenure for Devonte Graham in New Orleans and was sent off to the San Antonio Spurs in a salary dump at the 2023 deadline. The San Antonio Spurs have also made some really good free agency signings since 2010, but yeah, Doug McDermott in the 2021 offseason was not great. They gave him a 3-year, $42 million contract, and he just spent 2 years of this 3-year deal in San Antonio for them, 51 games in year 1, 64 games in year 2, and then they traded him back in 2024 at the trade deadline to the Indiana Pacers. Just not really a wise use of San Antonio's money during this rebuilding stage. Josh Smith was one of the more exciting players in the NBA in the late 2000s and early 2010s for the Atlanta Hawks, and then the 2013 free agency class, he ended up signing with the Detroit Pistons, 4 years, $56 million to only play 1 year in Detroit, or I should say 1 full year, before ended up getting traded to the Houston Rockets in the 2015 season. First year in Detroit in 2014, he averaged 16 points, but shot 41% from the field and 26% from three, and then 28 games for them in the 2015 season, he shot 39% from the field and 24% from three before they decided to cut bait on him, and he was so bad for them, they had to release him 2 years into this 4-year contract in Detroit. For Minnesota, I could have went with Nikola Pekovic, Kevin Martin, or Jeff Teague, but they all gave Minnesota at least 1, maybe even 2 good years, so I'm going to go with Jake Layman, who they signed in the 2019 offseason, and we were all really confused when this deal happened. It was 3 years, $11 million, and Layman in Minnesota spent 3 years there, a total of 102 games. Across those 102 games, he averaged 5 points, a rebound and a half, less than an assist, steal, and block a night, shot 46% from the field and 29% from three. For Golden State, I really had a nitpick here. I ended up going with the D'Angelo Russell, Kevin Durant sign and trade back in the summer of 2019. They had to pay D'Angelo Russell on a 4-year, $117 million contract worth around $29 million a year. D'Lo just spent half a year in Golden State though, 33 games where he shot 43% from the field, 37% from three, averaged 23.5 points a night, and then they were able to flip him to Minnesota at the 2020 deadline for Andrew Wiggins and a future first-round pick, which ended up being Jonathan Kuminga. But honestly, Golden State has been the model franchise since 2010, basically, so there really wasn't a lot of bad contracts out there. You could just let me know, Warriors fans, what do you think it is in the comments below. Dallas was also interesting. You could go with Tim Hardaway Jr., but that was more of a re-signing. You could go with Wesley Matthews. I'm going to go with Grant Williams, who they signed back in the 2023 free agency period, and Grant Williams only appeared in 47 games for the Dallas Mavericks, averaging 8 points, 3.5 rebounds, and shot 41% from the field before getting traded away to the Charlotte Hornets for PJ Washington at the deadline. They did have to attach some draft capital to that, but it helped them make a run in the Western Conference this year. So Mavericks fans, like Warriors fans, let me know what you think it is in the comments below. Do you think I was nitpicking there? In the summer of 2018, Utah re-signed Dante Exum to a 3-year, $33 million contract extension in the 2018 offseason. He would go on to just spend 2.5 more years in Utah. His best season came in 2019, where he appeared in 42 games, shot 41% from the field and 29% from three. In 2018, he was hurt, and in in 2020 he was hurt as well before getting traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The OKC Thunder have been a really great ran franchise as well since 2010, but in 2015 they re-signed Kyle Singler to a 4-year $19 million contract, and this is probably the worst deal that they made. Singler, after this contract extension, averaged 3.5 points in 2016, 2.8 points in 2017, and 1.9 points in 2018. For the Cavs, I'm going to talk about them signing Jarrett Jack in the 2013 offseason to a 4-year deal worth $25 million, around $6.5 million per year. Jack would go on to just play 1 year in Cleveland in the 2014 season, averaging 9.5 points, shot 41% from the field and 34% from 3. And after just 1 year into this 4-year deal in Cleveland, he was traded in the 2014 offseason to the Brooklyn Nets in a 3-team trade that involved the Boston Celtics as well. And finally, for the Denver Nuggets, we're going to talk about them signing JJ Hickson in the summer of 2013. They gave him a 3-year deal worth around $16 million. And in 3 years in Denver, Hickson played in 162 games, 9 points and 7 rebounds a night, but was just constantly hurt in Denver. But yeah, I also think the Nuggets have done a good job in free agency since 2010. So yeah, that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know what you agree with or disagree with in the comments below, or did I get any of these wrong? Please let me know down below. And like I said in the beginning of the video, if you do enjoy this and want to see me do the best contracts every team has signed since 2010, drop a thumbs up. I love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.